afternoon. This is Tait, Fletcher. Welcome to Pirate Life. Thank our sponsors, TD's Show Clubs down in Albuquerque. Also want to thank onit.com. Aubrey really hooked up some great stuff this last week and had a fantastic time seeing him in Austin. Original Nutritionals. If you're not taking fish oil now, you want to. You're going to be a better human for it. Your skin will be better. Your joints will be better. You get a proper ratio of the omega fats in your body. And you just operate at a lower cortisol and a better function. The whole body's talking about inflammation being decreased for better movement. And fish oil is one of the things that I do daily to help do that because I've got several issues, as most of you know. What else we got? UndisputedFitness.com, DeuceGym.com. And please check out all the products at StrongerFasterHealthier.com. Killcliff, just got a big shipment of them in at the gym I see, and head out to Detroit tomorrow and be taking that with me. I want to thank Ryan Schultz out there in Baker for all that. And I had an impromptu email that came up, and I just got really excited, man. Oh, and I just came back. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. But got an email from a guy, old school Hicks and Gracie killer, and God, that precedes jiu-jitsu in any form that I know of, so I'm really excited, man. And he's the author of a book. He happened to be rolling through Santa Fe the same time I'm here, and we just happened to meet. So sitting here with Pete Maguire, who wrote a book which is really pretty awesome called Tie Stick. I mean, what a great name of the book. And I don't know, we'll get into the background. Here's a little bit of the bio of him. Author of a book called Law and War and Facing Death in Cambodia. Historian, former war crimes investigator for the Department of Defense, whose writings have been published in International Herald, New York Times, Independent, Newsday, Boston Globe. Taught law and war theory at Columbia University and Bard College and back east there where he got hooked up with, before Henzo came, and he's at Henzo's Academy. So super excited to have you here, man, and rad. So
thanks a lot, Tate.
Yeah,
good to be here.
Yeah. So talking earlier, you're talking about your origins. When did you start writing, man? Because like everybody that I talk to, really, like I talk to people that have weird jobs, and that, like, in a lot of ways, I always make jokes and I go, boy, did my guidance counselor have it wrong, and I think maybe I stole that from Rogan. It's just like we'd talk we were sitting around, me and him and Ari and Eddie Bravo, and it's like, they're making money on stage doing this. I'm making money punching people in the face. Fucking Eddie's teaching people how to strangle people, and he's making music and all these divergent things. And the one thing that in common with everybody is that you're a loser. There's not really a place for you in society,
Absolutely.
And so if you don't fit that mold, like who are you? And fumbling around, and then as life goes on, it's like, the joke isn't on us. It's like it's these people just like us that have lived life in like this kind of magical way that is like a crest of positivity, and then where you're looking and going, boy, I just feel so appreciative that I'm here at all, and so I'm real excited to talk to you because you're further on that road than me, and it sounds like you started way before I did.
Well, it's funny that you frame it that way because I grew up surfing in Southern California, was a full-on pot-smoking juvenile delinquent, dabbled in the pot trade, dealt with the Crips, because the surfers had the connections, and
right.
Everybody was afraid to deal with the Crips, but I knew them.
So they sold weed back then?
Oh, the surfers.
Like, where were you, in Venice or something?
No, Malibu, Pacific Palisades.
And so that's like the Shoreline Crips and all that through there?
Shoreline was who I dealt with directly. Yeah. And my good friend, his uncle was the big dog of Shoreline. And so, and that's all in the book.
Crazy.
And then I also worked in the unions as a laborer, and I dealt with Daryl Strawberry's cousins.
Right.
And so I'd go down to Crenshaw as well. And my whole criminal history ends at 19. And so I moved to Australia at 18 and was competing in surfing, didn't do well, and said, okay, that's it. I'm gonna go to college. So I went back to New York and I went to college, and then I did really well, and I got into Columbia Graduate School in History to get my PhD, and was really not bored. Intellectually, it was fine, but you're sitting and reading, and it's so static. And so I started training in Wing Chun with John Peretti.
Right. And a little background about John Peretti. I mean, like all our MMA fans out there and everything, like he was one of the. It's kind of in the dark times of MMA in a way, which was the late 90s. I mean, the internet and little tiny, like, I won't even call them WordPress blogs, but like these little, like Abu Dhabi Combat Club at ADCC.com and things like that, they were the only things that we'd have a touchstone towards, right? And he was one of the old matchmakers, and he'd write some stuff here and there. And
so I started with Peretti about 90, training Wing Chun and kickboxing, and he had been, a world champ of some title in kickboxing, and was a really dangerous guy. And as I was coming,
dangerous to hang out with,
dangerous,
everywhere.
He had a concealed carry in New York City. Not many people have that.
Hard to get. Yeah.
And he was.
I was just in New York, and they said I had a little Spyderco knife or something because I was working a stunt job in Boston. I went to visit New York, and what it's like a work tool, and fuck, not there. They say that's a felony.
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, for a closable knife, they're like, yeah. And I was like, wow.
Yeah,
So concealed carry is a big deal.
So Peretti, despite all his stand-up skills, and he would get in these legendary street fights in New York City, and was kind of a righter of wrongs, and
out for justice.
Yeah, he really was.
He was a real Steven Seagal.
And if there was some bad actor doing something bad, he'd take him out, and he was not a scary guy.
Yeah.
And he would play this, I'm scared, I've never been in a fight before kind of thing, and then sidekick him in the mouth. And so the theater of fighting I really learned from Peretti. And then he started training with Gene LaBelle, and he got a black belt from Gene.
So Gene was in New York at that time?
No, he was going out to train with
Okay.
Gene. And so, and we were seeing the Gracie in actions. And
those are awesome.
And we were scared shitless by we were all good stand-up fighters, but this scared the shit out of us.
Right.
And we'd have judo guys and wrestlers come in and just say, do your thing on us. Well, we're going to try to hit you in the face, and if you can get us on the ground, get us on the ground. We were on hardwood floors.
Yeah.
And so then I grew up in L.A., and Hickson had just broken from Horian, and I had some friends, one guy who was quite a good wrestler, Todd Irvin, and he took me over to Hickson's, and I met Hickson, and we hit it off. And so then in the summers, I'd go home, and I'd train all summer at Hickson's, and that was unbelievable. It was.
And what was the? Because back at that time, and so Horian came, and he was going to build a real life Gracie in action. I just started kickboxing, like Thai boxing at that time, and he was going to start that, I remember, and it was going to be called the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And then, but the hero of the family after Hulls Gracie died in that skydiving accident was beyond measure was Hickson. He was the biggest, strongest, most fit, able, best, like kind of like a even at that time almost deity-esque.
Oh, absolutely. And when he split, everybody went to, and he had this classic shitty academy on Pico Boulevard next to an auto body shop, and it had these swinging cowboy doors.
Awesome.
And it was like, the men's day class was like lunchtime on the prison yard, and it was like Eric Paulson, Luis Limon, John Lewis. I introduced John to Peretti, and then Peretti got him fights, and 10 Brazilian.
And Luis Limon, he was one of the first black belts at Hickson, I think. He was a little dude, and then he went to Hawaii and started an academy, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you'd have these guys show up that were like prison guards and offshore oil workers, and just these monsters that used physical force in their daily work.
Right.
And
powerful
so
men.
Everybody in there was tough in something, and it was amazing, and everybody was very respectful. And
so do you know that was Hickson gonna first be where Hoist was in that spot in the UFC? Because he walked out in the Gracie train with him in the first one, I think, right?
I remember the summer before the first UFC, Hickson was training Hoist at his academy, and the relations between Horian and Hickson were so bad that
already at that time, even
horrible. And so
Hickson goes by a different kind of honor, and also his love of jiu-jitsu. He's, I think he's a classic guy in the way he's on such an elevated level that the idea of money and everything isn't really in his mind in a way. It's like it's more like, oh, you like jiu-jitsu? Let's come and we'll train. I mean, and that's
Well,
kind of,
put it this way,
it's like we're bad businessmen that love jiu-jitsu that much.
I went to Baja this summer for 3 weeks with my 6 and 8-year-old sons. We landed about 7 o'clock at LAX. We go up dinner with my brother. It's about almost 9 o'clock. I go, I think Crohn's Academy's right around here. I've never been to his new academy. So we roll over there, and there's Hickson sitting on the ball. He gives my 2 kids an hour private, and then he says, hey, Peter, take off your boots. And I'm in dusty, dirty street clothes. We roll for an hour, and then I roll for an hour and Crone says, hey, I got a score to settle with you. You used to beat up on me when I was a kid. I said, okay, then Crone, let's go. And so then I go with Crone, who's just
a big guy now too.
Technician, and just I'm so,
he was just over at Eddie Bravo's over.
So proud of him, and that he didn't buy into the point game, and he said, I'm going to play jiu-jitsu the way I learned jiu-jitsu. And that's
I admire where he is so much, in as much as the first time I ever saw Crone, he must have been 4 or 6 years old or something like that, and it was at the first Hickson Gracie International tournament, right? And I fought there as a white belt. It was the first real tournament that I went to, and Nino Schembry's there, and Marguerite, all these guys, man, and it was amazing. But Crone was there, and they did a demonstration, and he armbars his dad and stuff, and then Hickson's other son was there also. He must have been maybe 15 or something, I think, at that time, and then tragically passed a few years later. But coming in the shadow of all of that, and like not only your father, but his brother was a legend also. His brother was really on his way in that way, and what Crone's done as far as a competitor and a human is really it's transcendent. That is, I think, speaks with admiration towards of his father. It's like it is that. It's not like this. All other ways that it could go, especially in LA, with he's a spoiled little kid or this or that, and it's like he's walking a different way that is real admirable,
And he put the time in.
Yeah.
And Hickson, Hickson moved back to Brazil, and Crone did a lot of it on his own, and he really worked, and he lost, and he didn't quit, and he didn't settle. And what I really loved was that he played to win. Like, I don't let my kids go in tournaments.
Right.
Because I don't want them corrupted by point fighting.
Well, at 10th Planet, what we're doing a lot now is, like, we have Gracie Nationals, and so we do, and we're really pushing in a lot of the other tournaments, and now you're starting to see it in some bigger tournaments that are no points at all, and so we're just starting at the highest levels to get that kind of thinking going on, and it's funny to see writers write about it, too, because they go, oh, well, Shande passed his guard on top, and so he did have done. And it's like, if the rules of the game aren't constructed in such a way that passing the guard means anything, then you can't say anybody dominated any match. It just is what it is. Either somebody tapped or somebody did not tap.
Well, and all the names for this stuff, and the this and the that, and I know all of it, and I do it, but my jiu-jitsu is a brawling jiu-jitsu. It's a no-gi. I've been in third world countries working, doing, investigations and things like that. I've been attacked by multiple people, been on fights on motorcycles, things like that
you're like a regular
you can't train for.
Born Identity. Or like you're like Matt Damon in Boy.
No, I'm too weird. The company would never want. They would never want me. They'd disavow me if I ever got caught.
So that's huge stuff too. Like you're talking about, getting into. Well, first, like you're at Hensel Gracie's,
right?
And
no, I was at Kukuk's.
Okay, yeah. So yes,
Hensel wasn't even there yet. So Kukuk he rented space in this old-fashioned kung fu school.
Okay.
And that was a tough school. Like Hickson.
And that was in Manhattan.
And totally different vibe than Hickson's. It was a lot of Italian guys, and the Serra brothers were there. Matt was a blue belt when I was a blue belt.
Really?
Yeah. And so in walks John Donaher. His first day in a real jiu-jitsu academy. Huge
guy and a genius, right? Both those things are true, right?
He was getting his PhD in philosophy at Columbia.
And he currently teaches also, or does he not?
He doesn't. He shined academia, and I don't blame him. I mean, we were both in academia at a time where it did not pay to be a white boy.
Okay.
You know what I mean? They were not hiring. And so Donaher saw what I went through, because I wound up going to Cambodia to be a war crimes investigator because teaching was such a joke.
How'd you get that job?
Well, I got my PhD. My great-grandfather was a judge at the Nuremberg trials. And then my advisor was Brigadier General Telford Taylor, who was chief prosecutor at Nuremberg. I had two friends who were stringer photographers in Cambodia. They found a cache of photographic negatives from a prison. 20,000 people went in, and about 20 people survived.
Oh, my Lord.
Yeah, and so they set up a secret dark room, copied the photographs, and got those out of the country because at that time, the Khmer Rouge was successfully revising the history of Cambodia and saying the Vietnamese did it. Right. So I never thought anybody would be tried, but historical accountability to me was very important. So I wanted to try to preserve that evidence from the prison, and so I went over there and I started finding the guards, the executioners, the survivors, and ultimately I found the photographer, and I got them all to talk by hook and crook.
What's it like talking to an executioner?
Banal in a funny way, you know.
Are they thinking it's just a job and they're doing?
No, his name was Him Hoi. He probably killed 5,000 people with an ox cart axle. He'd hit him in the back of the neck, and all his superiors got killed. And so, you know, he tried to run away from the army twice, and they would capture him, send him to the front. He got shot in the head and shot 3 or 4 more times, lived through that. Another invasion, got a grenade dropped in him, survived that, and they said, Hoy, you know, comrade, you get a special job. You're going to the prison. So then his superiors all die, and I said, Hoy, you know, why, how? And he said, it was death either way. Death if I did it, death if I didn't do it. And so in a funny way, he was more intellectually honest, and, you know, he crossed an ethical point of no return. There's
sure.
no...
A lot of guys would have said, go ahead and kill me.
Yeah.
Because then I don't have to live with being this.
But most people, what you find is we tend to the survivor as the hero.
That's
Typically, the survivor has made some Machiavellian choices to survive.
Well, and that whole thing, I mean, it goes back to the same thing about biology's whole purpose is to recreate itself. And so maybe, in a way, he's a purer form of biology in that way, whatever it takes to stay alive.
Yeah.
You know?
And so, Cambodia at that time was a place where you could buy everything from AK-47s in the central market to SAM-2 missiles. The IRA had an Irish pub. The Tamil Tigers had an Indian restaurant. The Union Course had a club. And so it was like Dodge City.
Wow.
And I was 28, and it was really fun.
Yeah.
And I met these French military guys and started teaching them jiu-jitsu. And so those guys became great students and were all incredible.
All like special forces type characters,
and kind of mercenaries and really tough guys. And one guy had fought with the Mujahideen against the Russians for 7
Holy
years.
shit.
For 7 years, and spoke 17 languages. And was one of the most brilliant guys I've ever met, and still a very close friend. And he was a world-class kickboxer, and was just absolutely like what so many of us went through with jiu-jitsu. You're just freaked out the first time some guy a third lighter than you takes you down, and you're helpless, and you don't know how to breathe, and you're gassed out, and you're hyperventilating.
Everywhere you move is the wrong way.
Yeah.
And
so we would train on these horrible rubber mats covered in red ants, and 105 degrees, and it was great, And then I would go back to New York, and I'd go, okay, Danaher, I got another Cambodia coming up, and I'd go train with John every day for 3 or 4 weeks, and really break down jiu-jitsu to its basics, where no gis, sweaty, what's going to work.
In the worst case scenario.
Yeah, and you're not pulling guard in the streets of Phnom Penh.
Right. Well, the one time I remember being attacked by multiple people, it was like, I'm just taking the guy's back, I'm finding the wall and the floor, and I'm using him as a shield. And stuff. I mean, you get really kind of primal in those situations because it's your ass. And it strikes me right now with you talking, it's like, I've been loving all the heroes lately that are on, that we see on television, whether it's like for Breaking Bad or Dexter. It's like we got drug dealers and pimps and killers of all kinds and variety. But what we're really seeing in all of that is like and like I watched The Wire kind of like that and looked at it like from a sociological standpoint, and it's like more honest television in that like there's not a good guy and a bad guy. There's some days that you want fucking Hank dead, and there's other days that you're like, I can't believe they're doing Hank that way, and just the broadness of your life. And I always used to say as a kid, like, we don't know who that dude is until he gets locked up. And when some pressure's applied to him, we'll see if he can hold his mud, kind of thing. And that's how I always thought. But like, that isn't shit compared to like what you've continually put yourself into, the situations that you're into all the time, and the kind of high level of pressure that you've seen that embodies men, and seeing that, there's a little good here, and like with the executioner, there's, this is just his choice. He's not necessarily a bad guy, but he's killed 5,000 people that were innocent.
Yeah, again, it's like it's shades of gray. And like I said, there are these ethical points of no return. That you cross them, you've crossed them. And the way the Cambodians look at it, it's like, you're going to come back for 1,000 lifetimes as a cockroach. So what's it matter that you're going to get tried and get a 50-year sentence?
Right.
Big deal.
There's a way bigger picture they're looking at.
They're Buddhists. Big fucking deal, And so I would get in there and say, oh, look, isn't this great? It'll never happen again, and kind of put it through the Holocaust lens. And they'd go, this guy's...
Why would you think that?
Yeah. No, they would say, burn the past. It'll only breed vengeance. Forget the past. And so that turned me on my head intellectually, because I was reciting slogans.
Right.
And now I dealt with one of the survivors of the prison, a guy named Im Chan, who they kept him alive because he could carve statues of Pol Pot. And that was the only reason he lived. And I thought he was going to give me a big pat on the head, and instead he gave me a kick in the ass. And he said, this is stupid. I want that prison knocked down. I want those photographs burned. It will only breed vengeance. And that really made me begin to think about this stuff.
It's an interesting idea in our own history in the United States, when you think about, and people talk about white guilt, or they talk, or any of that stuff, or then there's survivor's guilt of people that are in wars, and there's all these different things that are kind of, they're sentient ghosts of the past that just haunt, that don't do anything to enhance your present or future. And when you look at that and you go burning, I wonder what the validity of something like that. Like maybe that is the way, in a way, because we're all just standing here today and we have to deal with what the present is, and there is no writing the past. It's been done.
Well, we're so twisted right now as a society, and it's very funny you're talking about all of us who we have pasts, right? And we cop to our pasts.
Yep.
And and it's like the Republican guy who's tapping the other dude's foot in the men's room and doing blow out of his palm at the same time, he cries rehab when he gets cracked.
Right.
That's a pussy to me.
Yeah.
Wall Street guys who go for the bailout, they're pussies. Like, capitalism ended in 2008 when the U.S. government, covered the bad bets of the banks. To me, the true capitalists, and it was really interesting going up the California coast and meeting all these young marijuana trade guys.
Yeah.
They were the true capitalists. Young guys, brave, living off the outside of society, prepared to accept the consequences.
Yep.
And it takes courage, something that is in short supply in America today. We have, they talk about freedom. We have the freedom of the lamb, and it's the freedom of the lamb not having to worry about being eaten by the lion. But the lion's freedom is entirely different. The lion's freedom is dangerous. Freedom is inherently dangerous. You don't get safety and true freedom at the same time, and that's where we're all fucked up.
I love that. Is it a Jefferson quote where he talks about man deserves neither? The man that would trade his freedom for security?
Yeah.
Like,
no, I'm disgusted. And I'm more the body politic that is just, it's kind of like they're sedated with, streaming porn, unlimited food, and...
Let's not get hard on porn here. No, I get you. Like, I just made a post today about it's just about entertainment. It's like from Roman times in that kind of way, and it's like, just give the masses bread and entertainment, we're gonna be fine. You know?
And I'm once I finish this book tour, I'm gonna start unplugging. You know what I mean? I'll check in here and there, but having this stupid thing binging and bonging in your pong, all the time, you can't read, you can't think.
There's no reflectivity.
Yeah, and I really, it's been eye-opening.
It's interesting. There's no reflectivity.
Yeah.
There's no. I was listening to a guy who's a NASA guy, and my brain is damaged apparently. Tyson DeGrasse, Neil deGrasse, and or Neil deGrasse Tyson. I always forget which way it goes, but he was talking about how it's not quantifiable, the effect that NASA has on the world, like that space expedition and stuff like that has, and so they would draw funds from that and nearly shut it down and all that. And he was talking about a telescope. As I don't know if it was 10,000, 100,000 times more powerful than the Hubble telescope. He's talking about, we think you could look back into the origins of time, which seems pretty spectacular. Like maybe you'd want to do that. I don't know.
Yeah.
And when you start thinking about time and distance and what that is, like it can see a distance that can look into the past. Like, and I mean, and it's simple. Like when you think about it, and there's like the sun starts to shine, and it's 7 minutes before it hits the earth. It's like he's looking that deep into space, and we're going, nah, it's not worth it, and it's not quantifiable, and it's like, because it's like $10 billion, which is like, I don't know, a month of air conditioning in Afghanistan for the troops.
Yeah.
And they need air conditioning, whatever. But
no, the F-35 fighter, a piece of shit by all accounts. But it's still, I was a defense contractor. I invented a boat that went into the military, and what I saw was they get you to a point of terminal financial velocity where you have to sell to one of 6 companies,
right,
and that's it. And so, you can't get loans, and it very much the experience radicalized me, because I just, I went, this game is rigged.
It's another enslavement.
Yeah, and there's good people. Most of the people in this country are good people,
right,
and once you saddle them with so much debt, they're terrified. They can't think straight. And I was in that boat, thinking, I got a lien on my house,
right,
and then the sequestration happens, and I'm not getting paid, and you try to get somebody in the DOD, you can't even talk to anybody. It's all online. And I just went, this game's rigged,
Well, and you going back to that, like you never get to be reflective, is that then what he was talking about was the power of that, is that when we went to the moon, or whatever, if we went to the moon, I'm skeptical, but like we start looking at that, and you start putting people going, oh my God, look at space. And he's like, and then microwaves happen, and saran wrap happens, and there's countless inventions and advancements that happen because kids started to look in wonder and amazement, and their minds started to grow. And like, if that's supplanted with whether it's the next text message or the next image or the next even upworthy video or whatever it is, that kid's only going to be sharing somebody else's greatness always. And there's no reflectivity into their own, and there's no wonder anymore in that way, except what they're shown that they should be wondering about. And that's kind of a trip, like that. I've never really looked at it in that kind of a prism.
And that's why I love jiu-jitsu, because it's labor intensive, and
you better be present.
Yeah, and it's not my primary fighting style, really. Like in all real world situations, I never went to the ground.
No.
And as I said before, it was some Wing Chun and boxing, and a lot of football, and a lot of running people over so you don't get surrounded. And it was a few strikes to deal with the immediate threat, and then run people over and knock them down. And that, you're big. I'm big over there at 150.
Right.
And so you would use that to your advantage, but everything's so fast, and you're attacked. You don't even perceive a threat. You're attacked, and next thing you know, it's on, and you're not thinking.
And there's multiple folks.
And there's going to be a lot more folks.
Everybody I know that's been attacked in any third world country is like, there was all of a sudden there were 6 12-year-olds or whatever, and it's like that.
Well,
it's like there's desperation.
Take a farm sickle with a long handle, and he was on a Ciclo, a bicycle taxi.
Okay.
And I just grabbed the front of that and flipped it and ran. I had the worst one was when 3 guys came on a motorcycle, and we were going 30, they're going 30.
And so you're driving, or you're on the back?
I'm on the back. And
who's your buddy on the front?
He's my driver.
Wow.
And
And what country are you in?
Cambodia. And they're stalking us, and I knew they were stalking us.
Because you're a white guy.
It might have been to do with my work. Might have been trying to rob me. I'll never know.
Right.
And so they sling back, and then they slingshot up on us, going probably 50, and we're going 30, and they ride up the back of my calf, and I always wore boots and pants over there, and so now they're stuck in a wheelie, and the guy holding onto me gets clotheslined between the 2 bikes, and we're doing that kind of death wobble side to side.
Jesus.
And so
Peter.
I hit the guy who's holding onto me somewhere in the neck and the face, that knocks the wheel out of the crook of my knee straight into the ground, and the bike goes shooting up, and so we're still out of control, and I'm getting these like single frames. One guy jumps off and tries to run at 35, and his leg does the Joe Theismann. The bike lands on one guy, and then it still bounces again, lands, and then it's stuck on the other guy. And then my driver wants to go back and kill him. And I said,
this is way better than that Jeremy Renner Born Legacy or whatever. I take that shit back. This is way beyond that.
But, and most of the time everything was more or less okay. I never rode motorcycles after that. That was the end of motorcycles for me.
In the States, do you ride or no?
No,
Just never.
No way, man.
Fuck it.
Did motorcycles more people?
You don't like being that open.
Yeah. You get hurt, And so, that was an interesting one. And there were a few like that. I had, a really weird one where I was way up in the provinces, coming back in a 4-wheel drive taxi, and we basically got held up in like a kind of Khmer Rouge illegal logging area. They just stopped us. They kicked the guys out of the back of the truck. A senior, kind of dark skin, which is indicative of the Khmer Rouge because they're more peasants, and they're living outdoors and stuff. He gets in the front with me. His 2 henchmen get in the back, and they put these 6-foot-tall wicker baskets in the back of the pickup. Right? We go for 2 or 3 hours, and there's only one dirt road, and we're on it. And they slap the roof of the truck, they unload the wicker baskets, and they disappear in the jungle. What was in the wicker basket? I'll never know.
Wow.
And so it's just, and the thing is, what you really see is if you let your mind start to run, you can make problems that don't exist. You can provoke. You can, and the henchmen, we had to stop to get gas. And they sell gas out of Johnny Walker bottles, right?
Wow.
And so we're getting gas, and the 2 henchmen come, and they start kind of fucking with me. And I can just tell by their body language. And
no English. There's no language between you two.
None. And I don't have my translator. Don't have usually I'd have security guys.
Awesome.
Don't have anybody with me. And so I just go, okay, need a diversion. And I always carried this Olympus XA tiny 35 millimeter camera. And I go, hey guys, picture time. And I pull the camera out, and they turn into little stupid kids.
They want to be immortalized
for the picture, and the whole thing's diffused. And there were so many situations like that where a quick mind is, that's the thing.
Way better than battle.
Yeah, and you see these guys, these meatheads. Like I would go to various jiu-jitsu schools, and there'd be these big steroid tough guys, and I'd say, hey, you guys are all big tough guys. Like, I'll walk you down to Times Square. You can join the Marines. You'll be in combat. Maybe you get Fallujah. Right. You'll be there in 8 weeks. How's that sound? You want to be Billy Badass.
Yep. Here's
your chance. Those are the badasses.
Yep.
Bathrobe wrestling, sorry. It's great. It's a great sport, but it's a sport. Yep. We've got some serious young warriors in America now that I feel like are getting screwed. And
I'll say. And you talk about a bait and switch that goes on. That whole thing where everybody starts talking about patriots, and they go, it's like they're nearly retarded. They're going, well, what, you're not for the troops?
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I'm not for them going to fight for Walmart and Halliburton in Iraq. I'm not for them being high-level security guards that are going to ruin their lives getting paid for minimum wage. When I heard that they fucking put a mall up with Walmart and all that kind of shit out of Baghdad for the troops, so I'm like, so here's lonely, scared guys that are out here doing a horrible job, making horrific choices. There's only bad choices to make, and you're putting them in that position. And then I'm going to pay them basically minimum wage, and then I'm going to suck all the rest of their dollars out by giving them shitty products at Walmart. Like, you motherfuckers.
Yeah, and moreover...
And you call yourselves patriots?
Yeah,
fucking shame on you.
And it doesn't... Well, and also, look at the policymakers. All of them ducked service in Vietnam.
Well, none their kids, disgusting. The whole thing.
And that's disgusting to me. And then you got these pundits that all should be fired for how many times they've been wrong. I wrote for the big publications before, and now I don't really care because...
What do you think of the investigative journalists kind of being targeted now?
It's really scary.
Yeah. What's your insight into that? Because, everybody I know that's an investigative journalist, the 2 people... Are terrified, and they say a lot of their friends are leaving the country, and that it's just not safe.
They're
and
reading
and
everything.
more often than that, like the CNNs and all that kind of stuff, that's all paid programming by whatever faction wants to put it up. I mean, like, if it was back in the day, the Khmer Rouge could fucking take out an ad about, like, hey, we're doing great over here doing humanitarian work.
During the Gulf War.
Exactly.
Exhibit.
I spent, I don't know, the summer in Louisiana, and I was watching those ads, and I was like, hi, BP, that's the nicest company ever. I mean, you look at those ads, and you're like, these guys are fucking awesome spin doctors.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly. And
so that guy that got killed from Rolling Stone, I mean, they're actually, well, I don't know, you can't say that, I guess, 100%, but it looks like he was murdered for maybe some information that he was about to drop.
I don't know the details of that, but I just, I know that nothing you do online is secure.
Right,
period.
Right.
And even...
Well, we knew that when Clinton got a blowjob or whatever, and he's like, no, I erased that email. And they're like, nothing's erased.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if the president can't erase shit, any pictures of your dick that you send out there, they're going to be out there.
Oh, and they're sitting on them for the day they need them.
Right.
To go, and so you're better off just going, okay, yeah, I look at porn on the internet.
Right.
Let's just get it out of the way, you know what I mean? So it just, and that's the thing, there's the intellectual honesty in this country has reached such a low. And when I wrote this book, my co-author was a big Thai marijuana smuggler. He worked with Thai pirates. He was a surfer from California, and he'd run, 8-10-ton loads out into international waters. And how we found this, we got together was, in that prison in Cambodia, I found the confessions of 4 Americans who were captured and killed by the Khmer Rouge, tortured horribly, and everybody said, oh, they're intelligence agents, this and that. I said, they're fucking pot smugglers, and so I got on the coconut wireless, and within, a day I had, oh, you need to talk to Mike Ritter, and that was my co-author. And so Ritter, he was in country doing that the whole time. So when I turned the manuscript in, I had a great editor, a South African or Zimbabwean woman named Anne McClintock, and she said, yeah, it's a great book. There's only one thing that's missing. And I said, what's that? She goes, Peter Maguire. I said, oh, what do you mean? She goes, how do you know all this?
Where's your story?
Yeah, where do you fit in? And I said, all right, So I had to cop to what I did, which was small beans.
It's weird, though, to be transparent like that, right? It's like just being in the public eye a little bit, like to the degree that it's like I don't know, Rogan always used to talk about it too. He's like comedians that aren't honest are shitty comedians.
Yeah. He's
like, it's not funny and it reads as inauthentic and disingenuous. And he always stressed the importance of that for his art. And then I just look at that and it's like, it's everywhere. And if you're not willing to be authentic, you're missing the point.
And this celebrity culture we have is disgusting and pathetic. And I do these book things and it's fine, but I want to just go home and go surfing and play with my kids and teach history.
Where do you call your home now?
North Carolina.
Okay.
And I moved down there when I was working with the military, and I really like it. People are nice. The water's
it looks
clean,
beautiful. The last place, the water's clean.
Yeah, the water's clean. There's lots of fish. It's easy to drive around. You can have any gun you want. It's kind of a pirate state,
Awesome.
So, and I copped okay, so they go, so what? Big deal. And it's very funny. I feel like there is a shift going on in America right now because people are realizing that the system's broken. The two parties are equally lame.
Right.
And I don't know the answer, but again, it's not working. When the banks got bailed out and I had government purchase orders and I couldn't get lines of credit even from banks, I went, this is a joke.
There's such a shift right now. It's crazy. I can't get a credit card.
Yeah.
And I've got a lot of money in the bank.
Right.
Sitting in bank account that's been there all, it's like, I was like, this is ridiculous. I've got a 730 credit rating. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah.
And I'm, anyway, it's a weird thing. I was thinking about it, though, with the country and the brokenness of it. And then everybody talks about, all we need is a third party. I'm like, motherfuckers have a check for the third party, too. It's like you put 15 parties, everybody's going to get paid, and your voice isn't going to be heard.
Right.
And back in the day, it's like, well, we're all in New Mexico. We're going to go ahead and send Fred up to Washington to get our voice heard. And then he's going to come back, tell us what's happening in Washington, and that's the way the country's running. That's called a congressman. Well, fuck, we don't need that fat motherfucker anymore. You know what I mean? It's like
Fred's bought and paid for.
There's no need for any of those guys anymore. We got Twitter. We could all vote on the internet, and they talk with Diebold machines and all that they know are owned by guys that are GOP pundits and all that. And it's like, there's graft and treachery going on with all the voting systems, but you're saying that the internet's not secure when we know that you're stealing from us.
Right.
That's
well, the
crazy.
Other thing, I mean, there's a great American historian named Richard Hofstadter, and his whole thing about American democracy was the most remarkable thing about American democracy was we could have bitterly contested elections and peacefully transfer power.
Yep.
We don't have that anymore.
No.
And that's
even in the Republican Party, we don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
You look at that and they're like, you're not a real Republican. You get like the GOP party doll, like a Ann Coulter or somebody.
Yeah.
And she's like, if you don't believe in this, we don't even fucking want you as a Republican. It's like, what kind of inclusive kind of group is that? Like,
but the irony of the Republicans is, classical conservative thought is all about individual freedom.
Right.
And it's about unhindered markets. So those people should be the greatest supporters of legal pot.
But right up until they find that the biggest fleecing that they can keep for the long term in the bear market, if you will, is of the American taxpayer. And so if corporations now have this distinction as individuals, and we all own corporations and are getting paid by corporations, we all have, like, the biggest union in the world is the prison union, the prison guard union. We have that coming on as the highest form of money making. Like, people are like, that's the fastest growing market there is to put your money into is privatized prisons. Well, if my business is privatized prisons, I need longer sentences and I need more customers in my prison. And then they have deals with the state and they say, we'll keep you at this occupancy. So then the state, it behooves them to keep you in prison long. It's
even more
fucking
terrifying,
crazy.
Even more terrifying is private for-profit prisons.
Yeah.
How fucked up is that?
That's what they all are.
I mean, this is a case, one of the best reporters I know, a guy named Ed Villamy from the London Observer. He proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Wachovia was taking Mexican cocaine blood money from Casa de Cambios and laundering it. And he basically proved beyond a reasonable doubt that, a couple of scams, that it was over 100 million. But there was something like 700 billion that came through Mexico that wasn't properly channeled. Wachovia pled out. Nobody went to prison. I mean, they busted a full plane full of coke that the Mexican cartels had bought in the U.S. with cash. And so that was the smoking gun. So Ed pieced the whole thing together, and what happened? Not a single person went to prison. Their fine was less than 3% of that year's profit. I think it was 2009. And then you get my buddy, KK Jackson from the Shoreline Crips. He's been, clean. He's a coach in LA now, and he's a civic leader. He spent 9 years in prison. He got shot 7 or 8 times. And again, here's somebody with a past who's copped to it, who's reformed himself. He gets caught with a handful of crack rocks. He goes to state prison for
Forever.
5 years. Yeah. And so,
well, and that's if it's a first strike.
Yeah, and the thing, like, the way the judicial system's turned into a casino game, like who pleads out first, who cooperates.
We're just talking
first.
with my buddy Benzo. He's a coach here at Undisputed last night, and we're going to hopefully finish that conversation today. But he just got out a few months ago off a federal deal. One of those conspiracy charges, where there's no weed and there's no money.
CCE, yeah.
there's no crime at all, but a couple people talked about that there might have been a crime. So, like, you can either plead out or you can try to fight us with all the money that you don't have.
Yeah, and you're going to go.
And you're going to go to prison for 25. Yeah,
and that's
my
co-author.
So he just got out from that and really changed his life in a huge way. But it's like, man, that's the hustle that's going on. And there's 8 people, like his girlfriend went away for 9 months or 8 months or something, just because she liked him. Like, she had nothing to do with anything except she was there in the house when they got arrested. And so she had to, you can either fight it, and who has a couple $100,000 or more to fight it?
Yeah.
Or you go to prison. And so he gets to go to prison.
And I tell people who are involved in the trade, I said, look, anybody asks you anything, you tell them you got it from the dead guy. That's it. Don't ever mention a name. You make coffee on the pirate ship, you're part of the conspiracy.
Yep.
And that conspiracy has turned into such a broad net.
You know what's funny is they use that to pin motherfuckers. Like, it burns you. But then it's also they use it to invalidate you. Like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
It's like, well, there seems to be a whole lot of evidence here. Like, I don't. All right, yeah, I guess there's no Tower 7 that went down, or what? You know what I mean? It's like you're asking me to just not look at reality.
Yeah, and not to question anything.
But then on the other hand, if 3 guys are talking about it and it's going to benefit the system in some way, you get more kill rates for your convictions, whatever district attorney you are. Then that conspiracy is good though. When it's just whispers, a guy that got busted for crank that says this guy used to sell pot and this guy used to drive for him, that's enough for everybody to go to prison. Yeah. That is ridiculous.
Well, like my co-author, he had his last marijuana scam was like 85, and he made $5 million. He left it all in Hong Kong.
That was a real good one.
And he left it all in Hong Kong, and it was coming over to the U.S. And the DEA had already kind of sniffed at him. And one DEA agent worked with us and was a great source for the book. And he thought very highly of these pot smugglers and said, man, these guys, with their logistical skill set, they could run any major corporation in the U.S.
They've got the nerves for it.
Yeah, he said, these were the best years of my life. He goes, I went from heroin guys in New York City to meth heads in San Diego to Thai marijuana guys. He's like, they're all upper middle class. They all stayed in nice places. He goes, it was a dream, you know, and they were nonviolent.
And that's the thing, the nonviolence. It's like I remember when we deal with, like, growing up and selling mescaline and acid and then selling weed, and then when we start selling, and those are a certain kind of people that are your customers then. You start selling crystal, you start selling coke. That's a whole different kind of animal. And then later in life, I started talking to cops because I never thought about it from their side at all because who gives a fuck? But, like, you know, much later in life, like after jiu-jitsu and stuff like that, and I start talking to those guys, and they're like, dude, I'd much rather go into a heroin den than fuck with these guys that are up here doing crystal. You know, and I started thinking about that as a cop. I'm like, yeah, whose door do you want to? You don't want to go through that door. Bunch of weed smokers, awesome.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Just high five. Hey, you guys want to just get in the car? Cool. Yeah. All right, we'll go.
So my co-author, you know, so they serve him with a warrant. They seize all our research. We were careful. We only recorded interviews with people who had been convicted. Anybody we talked to who had anything they were nervous about, we didn't record it. We didn't make a record of it. And so I say, okay, look, I'm going to write about this for the papers. They go, we'll take it out on your co-author in sentencing. And so that comes back to me through this lawyer I had briefly, and then he comes back to me and says, you know, why don't you go and they just want to talk to you. And I was like, how much do I owe you, buddy? And then I got, I worked with these heavy criminal defense lawyers in New York City who, you know, defended like Jose Padilla. And, you know, one of them was at a baby shower at my house, and someone says, what do you do? He goes, I defend murderers, preferably mass murderers. And so the real pros. And so those guys were amazing and helped us a lot. But my co-author, you know, is in the Hawaiian judicial system, which is everybody works with everybody. It's all favor trading. And so they basically tell him, you pay X amount of cash, you'll keep your house, and you won't do any time. He pays X amount of cash, and then they bump the number up.
Right.
And then he pays that number, and he goes to sentencing. They give him 3 years, and they take his house. And so then the judge throws him a bone and says, "Oh, will you qualify for drug treatment in prison?" And the guy hadn't even smoked pot in 8 years.
Right.
And so he told me, he goes, "Yeah, it was a little tough writing these essays. Why it's bad for me to rob convenience stores. Why I shouldn't beat my wife."
Holy
you know,
shit.
And so my co-author got out, 65 years old. He just graduated from University of Hawaii with, you know, a 3.9 average in mathematics and astronomy. And, you know, he's never hit a person in his life.
Right.
And, you know, he's an old hippie, basically, with great skill sets on the sea.
Yeah.
And so it's, you know, again, and then you have real scumbags who go through the motions of, oh, you know, they would negotiate their surrender with the feds and say, well, I'm going to get back money. Like one group, you know, their last scam, they made $43 million cash, and they go through the process of getting the government back $1.5 million. And so they get like a slap on the wrist. They get 5 years. Brian Daniels, who gets cracked for 72 tons, he won't. Great story in Daniels.
How are you transporting 72 tons?
On a 187-foot oil rig supply vessel.
How do you hook up with the oil rig guy? Like
you buy it. You buy it in Hong Kong or Singapore. Then he had a former Green.
You buy the whole boat.
Yeah, buy the whole boat, and then kit it out.
Because if you're fucking balling like that.
Oh yeah, you kit it out. You get an ocean-going tug, and all this is in the book. And so he got a 187-foot oil rig supply vessel. His captain was a former Green Beret. The Vietnamese military loaded the boat for them in Vietnam, and he came across the Great Circle Route into, and they're in international.
And what year is this?
This would be 88, and they're in international waters. And all of a sudden, a Coast Guard cutter, 200 or 300-foot Coast Guard cutter, is bearing down on them, and the Green Beret guy, you got to give it to him. He had some big balls, and he said, "We are in international waters. We are not stopping. You are not boarding. I need a presidential decree." And he's got the thing, and I saw the videotape of it. Coast Guard opened fires on him.
No way.
Yeah, shoots out the engines. Yeah, shoots them out with a 50 cals, and then starts priming the 5-inch guns. And they blew the engines, and so the mastermind was a guy named Brian Daniels. The DEA guy that was a great source for us. The only time he met him was at a Swiss jail, and so he goes in and he says, "Okay, Brian, I want three things from you. I want the $30 million cash that we know is in a storage unit somewhere in California. We want the names of the Vietnamese who helped you." And
I love where dope dealers keep their cash.
Yeah, in like an easy store unit.
Yeah, I'm in South Central off of fucking,
Yeah. And so, no, the best cash story, I'll finish this other one in a sec, was my favorite guy in our book, Mike Charlie Tuna Carter, who was the best boat captain in the pot industry. And he was an abalone diver, and he took a boat called the Ancient Mariner across to Thailand in 1975, a 1910 wooden halibut schooner. He filled it with 7.5 tons of prime lime green Thai sticks, got it back to California, made $20 million cash.
In 75.
In 76, by the time he got back.
Yeah.
Vacuum bagged all of that cash, put it in igloo coolers, buried it in his yard, and called it the Bank of the Igloo Underground.
Awesome.
And he did 9 years. But anyway, so
did he get to keep the money?
No, nobody does.
Nobody keeps the money. That's the heartbreak.
Yeah,
every movie I see, whenever they walk away from the like in the driver where he kills and he leaves the thing on the fucking parking lot, I'm like, I just need you to take that money with you, dude. I need somebody to walk with the money, please.
So Daniels is in the Swiss jail with the DEA guy, and he says, "Okay, yeah, Vietnamese, no problem there. I'll tell you whatever you want to know. My partners, co-conspirators, won't say a word. I'm not talking about any of them. Period." He goes, "But that $30 million cash," he goes, "if you let me walk out of here right now, that $30 million cash, it's yours." And the DEA guy says, No, Brian, that's for the U.S. and the government and the this and the that and the other. And Daniel says, No, it's for you. You get it. You walk away. And so the DEA guy says, No, I can't do it. And he says, "Okay, give me 10 minutes to think about it." And the DEA agent comes back, and the Swiss jailer says, "No, he doesn't want to talk to you. He said to take him back to his cell." Daniels never talked, and he got 20 years. The captain of the boat, he got 7, maybe served 5, and then went back over to Southeast Asia and was setting people up for the DEA.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. I mean, you just
saw my friend Lyle Copeland. He got busted. This piece of shit, Bobby Diamond, fucking, it was his cousin, and that's the way the cops do it, man. They bust a scumbag with no honor and no morals, and they go, keep working. They gave him drugs to sell, keep looking like you're in the game, and they kept providing him with drugs, and he would fucking rape people. He's a piece of shit, and he fucking said, "Hey Lyle, I'll be over. I need to get a key," and then boom, next thing you know, the DA kicks through his door.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. That's not American, right? These are not our
Nope.
frontier values, rewarding snitches.
Yep.
You know, and that's what's really disgusting to me is that.
Well, and what you make crime. That's the other thing with the current political system that we have, and then the current climate of dummies, of people that are just drones and not thinking, is that, well, if it's a law, like if you made fucking babies a law, like it's okay to do, people be like, well, it's legal.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's really that kind of a morality, and it's ridiculous.
Well, look at the big pharma, you know, and I have some real reprobate friends I grew up with in California, and I don't agree with the fact that they've smoked crack for 20 years, but, you know, I grew up with them. You know
Right.
how it is.
Yeah,
They're old friends.
Yeah.
And I do talk to them about drugs because they know more than anybody. And I
Yep.
go, so, you know, what is it now? And you guys still smoking crack? They go, oh, fuck no, we got these opiate patches and this, and it's all made by big pharma.
Yeah.
And so that is the critical thing to me is that they lost the war on drugs. People don't want illegal drugs anymore.
Nobody wanted.
They want legal.
Nobody
pharmaceutical
wanted
drugs.
that war to be gone. I mean, it's like the police, the DEA. If anybody thinks that those people want drugs to be gone, they're crazy. That means they're unemployed. Nobody wants to be unemployed. It's like I don't know. I said it in a thing the other day, and I was like, you know, when you're locked up, they can look inside your ass. You have no rights. They can toss your bunk anytime, go through all your shit. And there's more drugs in prison than there are on the street. I mean, more easily found. And so if you're telling me that we're pretending to have a war on drugs, okay. But if you're saying that anybody at all really wants there to be no drugs, you are so deluded.
Yeah.
That's crazy. The powers that are in the war on drugs, they're the ones that don't want the war on drugs to go away the most.
Right.
Because that's who it benefits.
Right.
And then the whole prison system, like that would all switch. It's like that union, the biggest voting power in the country, they don't want that to go away. And then I always thought too about, like, I haven't sold any dope in a long time, but like when everybody's like, oh, it should just be legal, just make it legal everywhere. It's the guys that are making their living off of selling pot. And I'm like, you know, you're going to work your way right out of a job. You're not going to have a job. Like, you're going to have to get a real job.
Well, that was the interesting thing in California is that, you know, and it was sad to me, you know, and I've actually am doing some consulting now with legalization right there because, you know, I'm seeing these scumbags, carpetbaggers like the post-war Civil War that are flooding the state, that didn't run a risk in the black market, were nowhere to be found on the front lines when it was real, and now they're good businessmen, they're well capitalized, and they're going to take the fucking thing over with their gross frankenweed that's grown indoors.
That's the other part that I got scared of is like when you look at like corn's not safe to eat anymore.
Yeah, GMOs.
What do you think they're going to do to your weed, guys?
Yeah,
if you're out there, you love smoking weed, and you think that it all should be legal, wait till Kmart starts making it.
Yeah.
Wait till Pfizer starts making it.
Well, and this like wax and all this other stuff,
Right.
you know, I'd never even heard of it. You know, oil made with butane, and so my advice to these guys is form a union, collective bargaining, man, and keep these guys out. Keep the GMOs out, keep the Dutch out, keep the Belgians out, keep the Frankenweed guys who sell you a seed that you know makes one plant and doesn't.
Right, what do they call those Terminator seeds? Yeah.
Don't even go near it.
Yeah.
And you know, I was very impressed. There were some real, you know, very impressive young men that I met that I was like, wow, there is still some frontier
awesome.
spirit
Yep.
alive in America. You know.
Well, and it's with the outlaws.
Yeah.
It's with the pirates. That's who it's with.
But that's what I was trying to get out. Fuck that. We're not going to pay taxes. I was like, listen, guys, you're as extinct as the T-Rex. You know, your pricing structure is collapsing, and it'll probably bottom out at some point. But the writing's on the wall. You got to get smart. You know, and you can all be independent growers under an umbrella, and that in my mind is probably the best way for them to go. But try to get 500 burners to agree on anything.
Right.
And I don't want to be in that
did you see what's happening in LA anyway? There's a couple of these supply places, these pot shops that they go in, the DEA, and they shut them down. They take everything, take the money, seize the accounts associated with the business. It's a legal business for the state,
Right.
but the DA comes in and does that. They sit on it. They don't have really any hope that they're going to prosecute those guys.
Right.
But now you're poor enough, and I've taken away your ability to do business.
Right.
And they can't defend themselves. They can't get their money back, and they don't have, all their
Right.
weed is seized. And so it's like there's a weird harassment that's happening from the government.
It's disgusting because it's a gray market, and you have
It
a
is a
president.
gray market.
You
That's
have
perfect.
a president that smoked the shit out of it. He didn't inhale once. He
Right.
smoked it and smoked it and smoked it. He grew up in Hawaii in the halcyon days of Hawaiian pot. I know guys who went to high school with him, and they all smoked a lot of pot. He knows it's not the end of the world to smoke pot. He knows synthetic opiates are worse than anything, and he won't
And
nut
he'll lie
up.
all the way to it.
Yeah, he won't nut up and let the federal government take a clear and firm position, and then all the confusion's alleviated.
And when you talk about why not, even though he knows it's a righteous way to go, why not? When he's leaving and he can't get elected again, why not? The only fucking reason why not is because he's been paid. Somebody is paying him to not pull that trigger. Or else you would leave the place, you would leave the White House in a better repair than you found it. You would leave the country in better repair than you found it. And it's like my mom was talking about hemp force there, this protein that I put in my coffee.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, what's hemp? Is that the same as pot and the same as marijuana? I'm like, well, actually, marijuana is a word that got made back in the day because they were scared of Mexicans and they wanted to vilify hemp. And so they brought that word here to make it scary for America. And then they made reefer madness and like the little history that I'm giving Mom, And basically, so William Hearst and all these kinds of guys can keep running their papers on paper because they own paper mills too, and that hemp, which is highly utilizable, regeneratable, better source for a myriad of things, but it's criminalized. You can't grow that in the United States.
Oh, I know.
So all that hemp force is all grown in fucking Canada, which is ridiculous.
And it's
so
not-
there's these throwback laws. So what I'm saying is Obama's getting a check from somebody to say, let's not go ahead and make that legal. Let's not go ahead and pull the trigger on that.
I mean, it's one of so many things like closing Gitmo or whatever, where Obama.
But if I make it legal,
yeah,
then you don't need your sleeping medication. If I make it legal, you don't need your Prozac. If I make it, what do I nullify if I make it legal?
right,
And that's what I start looking at. And I go, those are the guys that are paying him.
right. Human motives are too complex for me to get anywhere near. I don't even know why I get out of bed half the day.
So are you making most of your living now as an author? Is that where your heart
I'm
is?
going back to teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like teaching. I like teaching in North Carolina. I have a lot of veterans. I feel like the veterans need all the help they can get, and I really like teaching. And I'll do some consulting on military boats and.
Wicked.
Jack of all trades,
one of my friends, he was one of the first guys on SEAL Team 6. He was on SEAL Team 2, and then Marchenko called him and is like, "Hey, you want to be a part of this?" And so that's kind of like South Carolina, North Carolina, all those areas are the.
Well, and I have a profile coming out in the Surfers Journal, I think in the next issue, of a remarkable guy named Ivan Trent, who was in the original Marchenko SEAL Team 6. And he is a Hawaiian whose father was Buzzy Trent, the greatest big wave rider pretty much of the 20th century. And so it's amazing. That original group had probably the highest skill set in the ocean in military history. Now the skill sets are more land-based. I mean, obviously the SEALs will always
and
be
the
in the
huge
water.
technological advances that they don't need the same. Yeah.
But technology... we get to these war on drugs or war on terror.
Right.
As the great military theorist Karl von Clausewitz taught us, war is an instrument of policy. That you have to have a clear and obtainable political goal, not ending terror, spreading freedom.
Right.
And that the policy is the brain and military force is the fist. So if the brain and the fist don't talk, you punch yourself in the face. Right. And that's pretty much where we are.
It's amazing. When you talked about, what we have is the freedom of the lamb and not the freedom of the lion. And the thing is that if the lion is what we're being protected from, that's a paper tiger. It's like we're mean, it's all orchestrated about a boogeyman that doesn't exist, you know, that's the crazy part of it.
Okay, let's just say he exists. So what? So we have to be terrified, live in mortal terror of some Saudi Arabians with box cutters and a fleet of civilian airliners that are waiting to rain down on us at any time. I mean, give me a break. It's a joke.
Or, I mean, it's like, I don't know. I had a friend of mine. He's all cut up. He's got a couple holes in him here and there, and was gutted one time. And somebody saw him with his shirt off, and they're like, "Oh my God, that poor guy." And I go, "Fuck him." And he's one of my best friends. He's a 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu guy, Scotty Epstein. I was like, "Fuck that guy." I said, he earned every one of those pokes he got. You know what I mean? It's like he's not walking through life like a dandelion, just like smiling, being nice and generous to people. It's like he earned all those. Believe me.
Yeah.
And like the idea about like there's an enemy that's here to hurt us. It's like the more of a good guy I am, the less people stab me. Right. You know what I mean? Scotty hasn't been stabbed in years. He's completely changed himself as a human, you know? And it's like that whole thing about like, there's bad people, but I'm not moving in those circles, you know? And so like if we did that cumulatively as a country, there's going to be less people that want to take a commercial airliner and blow up our buildings. There just are.
Yeah, and I don't want some donut-eating cop protecting me.
Oh, God, I look at the TSA, bro, and I die. There was this fat motherfucker. He was, I don't know, maybe 5'6", and I look at people because of jiu-jitsu and weights and shit, and I go, that guy is 145 pounds, and he's standing here at 380 probably, and he can't stand. He's leaning into the desk, ID, and I'm like, this is an expert that's here to keep me safe. Like, is that what we're all pretending this? Like, there's all these people in the airport that are pretending that this guy's going to make a difference to us.
I go through.
Or that their little radar cancer machine is going to make a difference to it. I always tell them I can't lift my arms up. I'm sorry, I got shoulder injuries. I can't lift my arm over my head. Fucking my friend Ari Shafir, he goes, yeah, I'm medically unable to go through that. He goes, they're like, what's wrong with you? And then he's like, oh, I'm afflicted with freedom. I'm sorry, I'm not doing that.
Well, no, I had one where I said, I was like, oh, it's cooking my liver. Oh, my liver is boiling. And they didn't think that was very funny. But I mean, I'm in Raleigh, and they're running the dogs by my bag.
Right.
That's the bag I have.
They know who you are.
Well, no, it's the bag I have all my guns in, and I don't have my guns in it at the time. And they say, oh, the dog. Oh, look, there's traces of gunpowder. I said, no shit, Sherlock. I'm a defense contractor, and thousands of rounds have been in that backpack, and guns and magazines, and so here's this. Here's my concealed carry. Here's my ID. What more do we need to do? You know, and you're a minimum wage worker, right? And you wanted to.
It was either this job or you were going to sell Whoppers, and you're going to come. You know what I mean? Come on, stop it.
Yeah, and so I mean, and then there's the time when I get to my destination and I open my backpack and there's a handful of loose rounds in it.
Dude, I when I was on the Ultimate Fighter for the tryouts, I flew to Vegas and I'd driven from California here, and then I was in a training camp with somebody, and then I just got a call, and so I flew to Vegas right away, and I had a full magazine that I found in the hotel in Vegas. I was like, oh, that's not good.
Yeah,
really.
That happens.
But I'm not shooting anybody. It's like there's, you know what I mean. It's like I'm a law-abiding guy, and
everything I have is legal. I got all my permits are in order. I travel with guns. I have my lock case and everything separate.
You got to have a lock case, and then you have to have your ammo in a separate bag, right?
Yeah. And I don't even bring ammo. I get it wherever I'm going.
They're starting to trace that now. They're starting to fingerprint each round that's out there. That's what they're trying to. I don't know if they've done it already, but I heard murmurs about it.
Yeah, but it's futile. I mean, it's futile. There's so many.
Especially you buy 1,000 rounds, you sell it to me. I give a bunch to Nate. Like fucking whatever.
Yeah, and people reloading.
Yeah.
And those.
Almost everybody I know reloads.
Yeah, 3D printing. Stamping metal, and I mean, it's a futile game. There's no putting the genie back in that bottle. And
tell me about the weed.
What about it?
I want to know because I grow up.
Yeah.
And I'm in northern Michigan.
Right.
We don't have a whole lot of real good strains there.
No, the shit went there.
But we call it different stuff.
Right.
And like you could see it like when it's been put in like they used to put it in trash compactors to really compress it, right? And so we'd buy it, we'd get a brick of it, we'd get like 4 or 5 pounds in a brick, like a true brick. And so it's flat, mushed together.
Oh, yeah.
Hilarious, really. Sometimes mold in there, you know what I mean? Oftentimes. I mean, not just mold, like, oh, there's maybe some nerdy coffee guys that are going, oh, is there mold in my coffee, like I do, that you couldn't see anyway, that might be present or might not be. But there's actual fucking mold that you could pat inside the brick, right? Yeah, yeah. So we get that, and then there's like, then people make up different names. I mean, because everybody's a marketer, right?
Chocolate
and
tie.
so yeah, right? Or Hawaiian blue or something, or Maui Wowie, all this shit, right? And you don't know, and basically it's just a nice bud, and you see a nice bud like that was probably grown in Detroit in somebody's basement, not really flown from Hawaii. I bet they didn't keep it intact, you know. But this tie stick is interesting to me because I read a little excerpt in Pasatiempo about your book and talking about that it's put like on a like a chicken skewer, like you would get pad thai on or something like that, right?
It's interesting because.
So what's the origins of all that, I guess?
The origins of tie sticks come from what's called Isan, and that's northeast Thailand, on the border of Laos and Thailand. And so the hill tribes that came down from, basically were chased down from China by Genghis Khan and settled in northern Thailand and Laos, grew it in the river deltas, and they were the masters. And
why did they grow it?
Medicinal plant, poor people, helped. They had a myriad of medicinal remedies, from pregnancy, nausea.
No black market trade.
No, and it's still, you go, every family garden.
How shocked were they when white people went there and go, we want to buy all this?
Yeah,
and they're like, take it.
No, old man's drug. Old man's drug. Nobody smokes pot, and so the old men do. And so they would take the beautiful buds. And the ties are meticulous, right? So they would put, perfectly even amount of buds, and then wrap a hemp fiber around the stick to tie the buds on. And they were uniform, absolutely uniform bricks of them. And 1974, that was selling for $2,000 a pound. In 1974, and you could take it and press it against a glass window, and it would stick. And so it was. And
that's all cured, dried correctly. It's just the resin in it.
But
it's
it
like
was
that
tricky because some guys would get a load all the way over, and they'd cut open the bag, and it'd be white, stringy Limburger cheese mold after all that effort.
Really?
Yeah. So they had to vacuum bag it, but even then, they'd have to inject it with nitrogen. I mean, the packaging was critical. And then it was only
especially you're going through a lot of climates.
Exactly. And so maybe it would sit in a warehouse and heat up, and if there was any moisture in the bag, it would mold. So the packaging becomes a huge part of it. And there were guys who just specialized in packaging, and so you'd have your pot in the upcountry, and it would still have to go, all the way down hundreds of miles to the coast. And so that was another job. And my co-author would have these classic, Vietnamese refugee, real street urchin hustler guys, and they would run the gauntlet in a steak side truck with vegetables on top of it, and then
it's like the moonshiners in the South here or something.
Yeah, and then they'd have a pocket full of cash, and if they got
it's safe there. It's just a bribe. If the worst thing that's happening is you're bribing somebody, right?
Yeah, and then it went to oil tankers, and so they'd have a bladder inside an oil tanker, and they'd move it down that way. And and then my co-author worked with a pirate who had his own docks and his own warehouses, and so he would sit in the warehouse, and the 6-axle trucks would come down filled with packed pot, and then they'd put it on one of their fishing trawlers, but they'd only give him the crappy ones in case he got busted.
Right.
So he'd get on these trawlers. They didn't have compasses. He'd be the only white guy. And he'd be skirting the Cambodian coast. There was the worst piracy in the history of man at that time because of the boat people. And so these guys, they didn't play around. I mean, Mike, Charlie, Tuna, Carter.
And the boat people being people that were just disenfranchised people that were refugees after the war.
75.
That were just living homeless and desperate.
Well, 75, the U.S. pulls out of Vietnam, and we go, oh, the war is over. No, the war is just beginning for them. Our allies in Vietnam now go to prison camps. They get chased out of the country. And so the more prosperous Vietnamese would take all their wealth and put it in like women's jewelry. And then they would get on boats and try to get anywhere but Vietnam. And so there were cases that you'll read about where on the average, the boats would get robbed 5 times by pirates, to the point where they were stealing the engines after they got all the valuables, and then killing the men, towing the boats and the women to these islands where they would have these, just rape fests and just unspeakable stuff.
And they say that like that Vietnam was the first false flag war that we were in. That was based on a ruse, just to get into Vietnam and begin another war.
Gulf of Tonkin
Yeah,
incident.
yeah.
Well, I think a lot of it goes back to the 50s, and the French wanting out, and us kind of making a deal with the French to get them out, to get their support for NATO, and making deals in Europe, where my other book is about the deals that got made in the 50s, where the West German government traded their convicted war criminals that, almost nobody knows about this, and I found all the documents, and basically, the West German government masterfully played the State Department, and they said, if you want a military, there's only one military force that can stop the Russians, and that's us. So if you want us, you got to let our prisoners of war go. And we're not talking about, guys who drove tanks. We're talking about Einsatzkommandos, execution squad guys, the worst of the worst. And so by 58, they were all out. And that book took me a long time to get published. And people did not want to see that book published. And it was interesting because the people that really helped me piece that case together were the Germans. So I went to Germany and I worked for Spiegel TV, and I found the old German Foreign Office officials and defense attorneys, and they were in their 90s.
What kind of an expense does it take for you to write a book like that? Like to go there, set up shop there, start finding all, it seems like it's got to be costly as hell.
At that point, I worked, like I said, I worked for Spiegel TV, and they were doing a documentary on the Nuremberg trials. And so I was a historical advisor, and then I just spun that. But I had a lot of outside support over the years. I had a bunch of different rich people that supported my work and thought highly of it. And I'd say, okay, if I can get to Vietnam in a week, I can find this guy and get him to talk. If I can get here, I can get this guy and get him to talk. And they would cut me the check.
As a historian, like what? When and it's I don't know, I see this a bunch, but like it really became present in the last couple of years. There was a couple people I knew that were kind of like squatter punk dudes and kind of on the edge of that a little bit, and they're big into body modification stuff and tattoos and piercings and all that. That got really big on like that the swastika is not a Nazi symbol, that it's a symbol of peace and going back into these old things, and how in time immemorial it's always been different things, and they tattoo that shit on them, and I always kind of took the tact that now you're a Nazi, is like and I kind of use the analogy of like the rainbow flag wasn't always gay, but if you got that shit on your car, I probably think you're a weenie sipper. You know what I mean? Like that's just what's going on, and so and if you like that, awesome. Dudes like dudes, cool, do your thing. But that's what that means, and it's like the latest and biggest punch of the swastika is Nazi Germany. And as American skinheads.
Yeah, and go debate that at Corcoran with the Peckerwoods.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's where the rubber's going to hit the road.
Right.
And they can win a little semantic argument in a coffee shop, but get in the real world and have some.
It's really striking to me. I mean, I heard my friend Ari Shafir. He's a comic, and his dad was in camps.
Right.
And it's really, he did a podcast with him that just makes me cry. It's amazing that there's guys alive like that still. And it was just matter of fact, like the way the man says some horrific atrocities and separations that had happened in his life, and it was just what he walked through. It wasn't like there's no dramatics to it. There's just like, well, and then they took my mother away, and then and he's 5 or whatever, and so I look at that and I'm like, what does that guy think when he sees that shit on your face or what? That's like that's a different. It's not a regard for your community in a way.
Right.
And is that true, or is it true that there's something about taking back these images that have historical value in other ways?
Well, I mean, the the way I look at freedom of speech is it's an absolutist position. You're either for the rights of anyone to say anything, or you're not. And I look at this kind of campus speech codes and all this, and it's sad to me as an educator, because I see generations of students, both on the right and the left, and I feel like they've just been taught to throw politically correct penalty flags. And they'll go, oh, well, penalty flag, you said Indian, ooh, and I said, yeah, I said Indian, I said American Indian. And you know why? And they go, no. I said, because my buddy, who's the chief of the Sioux, who helped me on my first book, Law and War, he said he wants to be called an American Indian because Native American is what some university professor thought of. That's his position.
Right.
And so I went to one of the Sioux chiefs and I said, what do you want to be called in the book? I'm writing about the Sioux, your people. He said, American Indian. So there's my authority, and that's the thing. And so it's like there's no critical thinking. There's no debate them and defeat them with logic and superior reasoning.
Or syntax. There's not like a looking at like,
oh, you nanny goat. Oh, Mr. Administration, come and make him be quiet because I'm hurt and offended. And there are things like they say, you created an environment that made me uncomfortable. And I go, no, you were born uncomfortable.
Right.
And then you got these poor kids who have served 5 combat tours and seen their buddies blown in half.
Yeah.
You have 2 separate societies, and I go to these precious...
And the people that are worried about being offended are rarely people that are functional. They're very rarely people that are building something that's awesome and that has dynamic movement towards positivity and progression ever. Yeah. They're people that are hung up on the nuances so much they'll never get off the couch. And the only way that their greatness is ever extolled anywhere is if it's bitching at somebody else and somebody goes, oh, yeah, I like that guy bitches. Like, that's the only fans you have are other assholes that like somebody that complains.
They're like intellectual referees.
I heard a guy, a great quote the other week, and somebody was saying, me changing my behavior because you're offended means that I should alter what my thoughts and manifestations are because you can't control your emotional state. Like, that's crazy. That's what we do with children.
Right.
Like,
and that's why I teach at a state school. I don't try to get tenure. I don't have to go to their boring meetings. I go to my class. I teach my class. I go home. I teach kids jiu-jitsu. I have some adult privates.
What school?
I'm teaching now at a Nova Uniao. That's at Charhuto's school in North Carolina called Evolution Mixed Martial Arts. Great school. A lot of tough guys in there. It's tricky. I'm kind of the martial arts Ronin because, I've been offered belts from other people, and I'll really only take them from Hickson just because of the politics of martial arts. I got a black belt from Peretti and Jeet Kune Do, more or less, and that's my real style anyway.
You still talk to Peretti?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He's kind of been airbrushed out of the history of mixed martial arts.
Interesting, huh?
And the UFC, he was a matchmaker for the UFC also.
Yep.
And, I remember...
Back when SEG owned it.
Yeah, and I remember when Igor Zinoviev walked in the first night, and, we trained him for his fight with Mario Sperry. And that was one of the great upsets ever in mixed martial arts. And Igor was one of the toughest guys I ever saw. If you want to see a great fight, watch that on YouTube.
What's interesting too is the longevity. Like guys like you, or also you mentioned Mario Sperry. Rashad Evans now lives down in Florida, and Mario is the jiu-jitsu coach down there, and he's got such fine things to say about him. About the guys, just like to think of what he was 20 years ago must be amazing in his youth, but like because he's a destructive monster right now, like still just as technical, strong, and tenacious.
And I think he has some pretty. At one point, he had a big white collar job, and he's a university graduate.
Well, that's like the brothers, the Nogueiras.
Yeah,
they're lawyers.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And then Big Nog goes over, he fights in Pride a little bit. And they're on the phone. He's like, dude, you got to quit that lawyer shit. This is awesome, and we're getting paid great by these Japanese. And you know what I mean? And that's like how it happens. It's like that's interesting, like where we all come from, the backgrounds.
Yeah. But no, Peretti was instrumental in the beginning, and he's, like many innovative people. He says what he thinks and offends many, and
Right.
that's who he is. And
Yep.
and
People are like, he's not good for the brand.
yeah, exactly. It's like people say to me, like, well, geez, I don't think this book is good for surfing. And I go,
How
well,
interesting.
no, they say
They're
to-
synonymous.
Yeah,
Smoking weed and surfing
yeah,
is
they,
this.
No, they say to me, do you think this book is good for surfing? I go, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And I see, there was, when I was growing up, there was a Christian Surfing Association.
Yeah.
There was a Western Surfing
I mean,
Association.
how could it possibly be bad?
And there was a Marijuana Surfing Association.
Do you think that the question it turned is, do you think that an accurate representation of a portion of the truth of the history of surfing is dangerous? So is the truth dangerous? Is that what you're saying?
Very
You want,
dangerous.
like
Safety.
that's crazy.
Yeah, Tate, we got to be safe.
So
you
wild.
know?
I would have been if I could have been. I swear to God. Like I would have been, but I would have just fucking killed myself. Like the idea of going to and kudos to anybody that can, but like the complete, like the mundane, inane, mind-numbing tasks that is the busy work of most school that you go through high school and college, like to get a degree, and what the degree mostly shows is that you had the grit to be able to get through it and pay attention and not fall asleep through all of it.
I look back on getting my PhD.
Oh.
I don't know how I did it.
It's amazing, but it gives you some kind of I did this, a badge in a way. But I look at a lot of guys with PhD, like in nutrition and stuff now, especially. I'm like, you guys don't know anything. You guys are maybe a decade behind it,
Right.
and so it's like the real world application, like what you're talking about with the transparency of the internet and everything else right now. It's like the transparency of education is so vast. There are no victims, man. You can find out anything you need about anything.
But the problem that I do see, and the things that I really got from studying with someone like Telford Taylor, the chief prosecutor at Nuremberg, was
so amazing
standards of evidence. Just
right.
You see a lot of
The difference between science and junk science,
you
or a
just
trick,
see, like
or
some of the internet stuff is 2 + 2 = 72, and it's kind of 2 + 2 + XY + ZZZ, and it might mean that, but they make these leaps of logic,
right.
And it appears very presentable.
Even with science, though, that's what we've done. Like I've just been looking a lot into cholesterol lately, and they say that's the first thing that they could isolate and they could measure in the blood, and so they started looking into a whole lot of things, and then heart disease was a big deal that people were looking at, and it was a big industry medicinally. And so then they start looking at statins, and they say, oh, well, this is causation. And even though it's never been causation, it's just been present, not really even a correlate to heart disease, but that's what it gets dubbed as. And so then there's an issue around cholesterol, and now it's spinning the other way, and people are saying, if you have Alzheimer's, you also have very low cholesterol, and like all these different diseases that
Right.
come from not having those fats in your body, and
Right.
so it's an interesting dialogue that we're having as we grow as a society. That even what was science before, that was exact science, and they're like, no, that was junk science that they built a whole industry on.
Yeah,
which is
I basically eat, and I've eaten this way my whole life. I eat proteins, fish and meats, and vegetables.
Yep.
And some fruit, but I've really never liked dairy products. It just has never been anything I liked. And I'll be 50 soon, and I'm still doing most of everything. I can't really train jiu-jitsu more than 3 days a week anymore, just because
the joints get sore.
Hips
Yep.
and stuff like that. And I choose the people I train with
Sure.
carefully, because I like the big, strong retards that try to kill you.
Right.
They're the funnest, but it just wears my
Yeah.
joints out.
It's a lot of pressure.
Grapevine 'em, and I use my legs a lot.
Yep.
But it is fun, and that's where you test.
You
your
gonna roll
skills.
with Ruben a little bit today?
Yeah,
awesome.
Tomorrow. 10.
Tomorrow,
Yeah,
good.
I'm excited.
He's great. He's really fantastic.
Yeah, I'm very. I've looked at the 10th Planet stuff.
Yeah.
On the internet, and I'm curious about it. And I just want to bring a couple of tricks home with me.
I'm glad that you. I'm glad you stopped by. I gotta wrap up, and
Likewise.
I'm sure you got things to do. Tie Stick is the name of the book, and I can't wait to read it, man. It looks amazing. And Peter Maguire, do you have a Twitter or an Instagram? Is there how do
I
people
have
reach
a
you?
Twitter. It's I have a website, taistickbook.com, and a Twitter, taistickbook.com.
Cool.
And I'm hopeless on both of them. And pretty much anti-technology. But
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much
Oh,
for
no, it was
coming,
great.
man.
Great
and,
fun.
And we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.